More than 60 years after their infamous escape from Alcatraz, new age progression images reveal what three fugitives still on the run could look like today. This is a case that has fascinated the country for decades. In 1962, the three men escaped from the prison through a tunnel, and they have never been seen again. If they made it off that island and they are still alive, the men would now be in their 90s. Michael Dyke is a retired supervisory deputy U.S. Marshal who has been looking into this case for years and joining us live tonight. I call it a fascinating case. It's captivating. 60 years, though, is a long time, as you know, Michael, to go by. Do you think that these fugitives are still out there? They're still alive?
It's not very likely that they are. Even at their advanced age, there's not likely if they lived through the escape that they would be alive. But I'm more of the opinion that they didn't make it through that whole first night. There's always a chance they did, but I still don't think they really did just because of all the other factors involved.
So walk us through what leads you to believe that they never made it out of the water.
Well, they kind of left at the worst time possible. I have all the ocean currents charts from that evening, and it shows in right about 15, 20 minutes before they actually probably got in the water, the tidal currents from the bay were actually starting to head out to the ocean, and they were going out at an ever-increasing rate up until about midnight. So I'm estimating they got into the water around 10:30 p.m. So it's like an hour and a half of increasing currents taking them out to under the Golden Gate. And then it started to slow down at about midnight, but they were still going out to the ocean for 3 more hours after that. So it's not very likely they were able to make landfall inside the bay.
It is believed they were on sort of a makeshift raft made up of raincoats. I mean, could they have survived on a floating device such as that, kind of pieced together by material that barely floats?
Yeah, it's possible. There's been a couple other people who tried to duplicate that. But if you're going to make a makeshift raft out of raincoat material in a makeshift workshop, it's not going to be very watertight or seaworthy. So one of the three of them would have had to keep probably constantly inflating that raft while the other two are paddling. And more than likely, once they got into the water, they probably would have found out the raft wasn't taking them where they wanted to go. They might have probably abandoned it and tried to swim, and they'd still be in the same situation of being pulled out towards the ocean.
Is it correct, though, a raft was found around that time on the shore on the opposite side of where the island was, and there was also a car that went missing and that had been stolen that night?
Yeah, so those are things that were reported that evening or that day. Actually, the next day they were reported. The raft that was supposedly reported the next day was actually turned out to be some pallets that were washed ashore on Angel Island. It was initially reported as a raft because they had a helicopter circling around and the helicopter spotted it. And then at that point, they put out a CHP BOLO, which is a be on the lookout alert for other law enforcement, and they put that note inside of there that the raft was likely found on Angel Island, but that wasn't. It turned out to be just some pallets. And as far as the car missing, that was reported a day or two later by someone that the car ran off the road, and they said it was occupied by at least 2 people. And they thought it could be that, and they said it might have been stolen from Marin County, but there's actually no way right now to go back and double check all that because all those records have been purged. So there's no way to double check everything that happened from that.
6 decades. I think part of the fascination, Michael, is the way that they escaped. I mean, right, it was a years-long plan. They had this workshop. They used body doubles to fool the guards. They dug themselves out. They had that raft that you talked about. Do you believe they were in contact with anyone on the outside who may have tried to help them, not only with the plan, but if they were able to get across the water? Have you ever uncovered any links to people on the outside?
I haven't uncovered any solid links. The only correspondence we ever could verify is just stuff between them and their family. And that's just done by, there's a mail list showing when letters are received and when letters are mailed out. There's always, everybody comes up with these things. Oh, well, they probably communicated through someone else. I mean, and you can go on all day. What if? The FBI was very, very thorough when they investigated this back in 1962, and they went through. They left no stone unturned, and they couldn't find any correspondence with anyone that could have assisted with the escape.
Yet the case is not cold. It was reopened in 2018. Finally, there was a letter in 2013, someone claiming to be one of the escaped inmates asking for medical attention and some aid. Did anything ever come of that?
Yeah, I looked into that myself, and we did some forensic stuff on the letter. First of all, none of the handwriting matched even close to any of the three escapees. Not even nearly close. There was nothing similar. There's some other stuff we did to it too, for forensic examination. So you can't really say it came from them. And then other people would say, well, he had somebody write it for him. So you can go, like I said, we can go what if on everything on this. It comes right down to it. Some of the factual stuff that was written in the letter. Through a lot of research on my end, that letter came in when I was before I retired, so I looked into that quite a bit. And nothing panned out on any of it. None of the information that was listed could be traced back to anything. They were marking, someone dying in Alexandria, Virginia at a certain time. Probably Morris, I think they said on that letter. And there's nothing indicating anybody of that approximate age even was died or buried in Alexandria. So I backtracked everything you can track on that thing, and there's nothing that panned out.
Well, it sounds like your investigative work has been thorough, but the mystery remains as to where they went that night. Michael Dyke, we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Marnie.
Good to talk to you.
Now is Democratic Florida State Representative Angie Nixon. She was one of the lawmakers invited to take that tour of the facility over the weekend. Good morning to you, ma'am. You've been extremely vocal about the conditions that you witnessed at the facility. You called it an internment camp. Tell us what you saw and what really stood out to you.
Yeah, for sure. So not only did I witness folks being treated inhumanely down in the Everglades detention center, but what I also noticed was there was a huge waste of $450 million taxpayer dollars. Look, we have a governor who has suspended laws and offered up no bid contracts for his campaign donors and friends, as well as Donald Trump's campaign donors and friends. He is not reporting to the Florida auditor in regards to all the expenditures that are coming out of this facility down in South Florida. They are buying boats, they're buying SUVs, they're purchasing planes. And again, they're giving it away to their friends. And at the end of the day, this is also just about him not following the law and following processes and procedures that are in place. They've also asked, could ICE suspend their standards for housing detainees? And it's really appalling.
Can I take you back to something you said right off the top, that you witnessed people being treated inhumanely? I was under the impression y'all were given tours of empty parts of the facility. Is that correct? And what do you mean when you say you saw people being treated?
Yeah, so it was both, right? So not only that, but we also witnessed, I was able to see the detainees that were coming into the intake area, and they were shackled, and they started yelling muy mal, letting us know that they were treated inhumanely. Not only that, but we're hearing reports from not only the detainees, but from some of the folks that have worked there, that they didn't initially have enough food to provide for the detainees as well as staff. And so they offered up this really hyper curated, Uber sanitized tour, which was a field trip for some, but I was looking to go there to see what was happening, right? And for them to not allow us access, which is our statutory right as state lawmakers to go unannounced to state facilities, for them to not allow us to pop up unannounced a week prior and them to roll out the red carpet a little bit for us a week later just goes to show you that they have something to hide.
And let me ask you, it's pretty crazy how different the stories are from lawmakers who are allowed to go on this tour. Dems like yourself coming out and saying it's unsanitary, it was 85 degrees inside, it's bug infested, crowded. Republicans are walking out saying, nope, didn't see anything of the sort. Somebody's not telling the truth here, it seems. And what do you tell American people who don't know who or what to believe?
Listen, when you have a $450 million taxpayer dollar failed stunt, you got to save face. at the end of the day, we were rushed. I was a part of the second tour. We were being rushed throughout our tour saying, hey, we need to hurry up. It's going to rain. It's going to rain. Please hurry up. And then we said, no, no, no. We want to wait and see what happens when it rains, because we were hearing reports that sewage would come up when it would rain, the lights would go off. And then all of a sudden it was, hey, there's a security issue. We got to put the place on lockdown. We got to get you out of here. No explanation. They sent us away. And a few minutes later, it started raining. So they clearly have something to hide. There's a lack of transparency, a lack of oversight. And if you were suspending all these laws and all these rules, clearly you're doing something that it goes against what the taxpayers want.
And you're suing over this. I know you're saying that you're not stopping until this facility gets shut down. You're suing Ron DeSantis over this. Have you heard anything back from him yet, or anything more on the other states that are apparently taking notes and want to put up facilities just like this one?
The continual political rhetoric from Ron DeSantis, who likes to attack folks who do not just hold his water. And at the end of the day, I want to be a good fiscal steward of taxpayer dollars. There is $450 million that we know of. This is going to be a $450 million taxpayer dollar facility. Not only that, but they are also providing overtime for senior managers and so much more. We don't even think that they're taking into account this overtime from folks who they quote unquote saying are volunteering for this duty, right? And so I am sure that this cost is going to balloon more than $1 billion. And this facility can come to a state near you all. And not only that, but again, they threw up tents. It's a raggedy ass tent city, basically.
Well, the migrant detention center in Florida, known as Alligator Alcatraz, is being populated with detainees. And this weekend, lawmakers were allowed inside. And what they found really depends on who you ask, right? Some people, some say that people were packed into cages, while others say there were no issues. The new facility is safe. It's secure. NewsNation's Brooke Schaefer has been following this story for us closely. And Brooke, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, of course, defending the center, even though there are wildly different takes on what lawmakers saw. What are your sources telling you?
Well, Marky, Democratic lawmakers described inhumane, unsanitary, and bug-infested conditions at this Florida detention site. The group of lawmakers visited Alligator Alcatraz over the weekend as part of a state-arranged tour. This migrant detention facility deep in the Florida Everglades, you'll remember, has faced protests from environmental and human rights groups. Democrats are saying it's a stunt that needs to be shut down.
These detainees are living in cages. The pictures that you've seen don't do it justice. There are 3 tiny toilets that are toilet units that have a sink attached to it. So they essentially drink, they get their drinking water and they brush their teeth, where they poop in the same unit.
But Republican lawmakers on that same tour said Democrats are lying about the conditions inside the 3,000-bed temporary facility, which Florida officials have said includes 158,000 square feet of housing, power supply, and backup generators. Some detainees and family members have reported difficult conditions with mosquitoes and extreme heat. Florida officials called those claims completely false, and DHS Secretary Kristi Noem said any issues have been addressed.
Alligator Alcatraz is held to the same standards that all federal facilities are. Any issues that were there have been addressed. It's a fantastic resource for us to be able to utilize in order for a detention facility to repatriate people back home to their home countries.
President Trump, during his visit earlier this month, said he hoped this would become a model for other states. And Secretary Noem over the weekend said she is in talks with 5 other Republican governors to create detention centers inspired by Alligator Alcatraz. Marky?
All right, we'll see who comes next. Brooke Schaefer, thank you so much. Just about 10 minutes to the top of the hour here. Controversy in Florida as opening day approaches for a new immigration detainment center that officials are calling Alligator Alcatraz. The Department of Homeland Security posting this picture onto its X account showing alligators in these ice hats as protests erupt over the weekend, with environmentalists and human rights activists saying that the facility is inhumane and will hurt the ecosystem. NewsNation's Brooke Schaefer joins us with the latest there. Brooke, the state of Florida is moving forward with this, despite everything. What does the president have to say? And is he all systems go on this plan?
He seems to be so, Marky. A source familiar with the plans tells us that President Trump and DHS Secretary Kristi Noem are both expected to visit this controversial detention center dubbed Alligator Alcatraz as it opens tomorrow. This project deep in the Florida Everglades was fast-tracked by Governor Ron DeSantis. Late last week and over the weekend, workers set up tents and trailers at the virtually abandoned airport, soon set to house up to 5,000 migrants. Just outside the construction zone this weekend, though, were hundreds of protesters who lined the street leading to the soon-to-be ICE detention facility, surrounded by marsh, alligators, and snakes. Environmental groups fear the site just west of Miami will damage the Everglades ecosystem, while some Native American leaders claim this facility encroaches on sacred land.
The Everglades in itself is just a very sacred area, and the habitat here needs to be preserved and taken care of.
Our lives depend on this Everglades. And, you know, bringing this facility here is disrupting everything.
Some human rights groups have also called it inhumane and raised serious issue with potentially thousands of people being housed in temporary tents and trailers during Florida's hurricane season. Environmental groups late Friday filed a last-minute lawsuit hoping to halt the facility's opening. In response, Florida Governor DeSantis, his office said this detention center, supposed to open tomorrow, will have no impact on the surrounding environment. Meantime, DeSantis is also said to be eyeing a second potential migrant processing center at Camp Blanding in Florida, a National Guard training base. We'll see what happens there. Marky?
And Brooke, as you and I have been talking about the visuals of this facility, just pretty remarkable. Crocodiles, alligators, pythons. So we'll see what this trip looks like for the president. Brooke, thanks.
It's set to become the largest immigration detention center in the United States, and it is said to cost nearly $500 million a year to maintain. Here's the president making the sell.
It's known as Alligator Alcatraz, which is very appropriate because I looked outside and that's not a place I want to go hiking anytime soon. But very soon this facility will house some of the most menacing migrants, some of the most vicious people on the planet. We're surrounded by miles of treacherous swampland, and the only way out is really deportation.
So the question is, do you need it? And why? Who better to answer it than the man in charge of figuring out who gets deported and how, Trump's White House border czar, Mr. Tom Homan. Tom, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris.
So it is interesting how Alligator Alcatraz has made so many people happy and feel like the government is finally doing its job, and so many people absolutely outraged that this is demonizing and dealing with people who entered illegally as if they were all hardened criminals. How do you respond?
Well, you know, we prioritize those that are public safety threats, not just illegal aliens, those with serious criminal convictions and also national security threats. And this facility is key for is criminal aliens. Those are a threat to public safety. And we need these beds. You know, I've been saying since January 20th, if we want to run this deportation operation, we need funding. We need more detention beds. Everybody we arrest, we need a bed, because they're going to be in detention from several days to several months, depending on the case. So, and yesterday, I didn't see the numbers today, but yesterday I woke up, we had 1,600 beds across the nation empty, 1,600. We'll fill them in a day. And we're constantly playing this keep up. We got to remove so many people. We can only arrest so many people. This day we got so many beds. So these will give us a little breathing room, give us extra beds so we can target more criminals throughout the country.
Everybody's talking fiscal austerity. You're not a lawmaker, but you do have to deal with budgets. And they look at this line item, and it's one of the biggest ads, hundreds of billions of dollars to run this one facility. And again, people look at it and say, do we really need this? Why do we need to put this much money and emphasis on deporting people who've entered illegally?
Well, let's compare it to the last administration. Okay, they were putting illegal aliens in hotel rooms in New York City for like $500 a night. And that's a fact. $500 per alien per night for a hotel room. Then they had to pay for food, three meals a day. They had to pay for medical care. They had to pay for attorney access. All these other things were added to that $500 a night. So who knows what the cost was, really? I don't have that number. I can tell you the beds here are just under 300 is what I was briefed on, and that includes 3 meals a day, full medical, doctors and nurses on site. So you got your food, you got medical, and what's great about this facility, Chris, is there's an airstrip right there. So we can also have additional efficiencies on transportation because we have air transport in Arizona, we got in Texas, we got in Louisiana. Having an airstrip in Florida, we can have all the East Coast states staging in Florida instead of having sending some to Louisiana, sending someone to Arizona for a removal of Central America or to Asia. Now we have an airstrip right there in Florida, which is not only benefits that facility, because we're going to have immigration hearings also at that facility in Florida, which means when they get ordered deported and we get a plane load, we can simply load a plane right there and take them to their home country. So it's a cost savings on the beds compared to last administration. And it's extreme cost savings on transportation because you got an airstrip right there that can serve the entire East Coast. The October to May numbers, you say, look, we're targeting the guys and the women, I guess, also, who are a threat to society. It's 3 out of 4 are traffic, immigration, or other low-level offenses. Only 1 out of the 4 are serious felons in terms of like murder, rape, high-value crimes. Is that the right ratio? No, I don't think it is at all. I mean, the vast majority of people arresting have criminal conviction, public safety threats. But, and people look at, for instance, we arrest some people in county jails in non-sanctuary states, and they have a pending criminal case. So we found them in the county jail, which most likely means they're not a choir boy. So they're pending criminal charges. The left don't want to count that. They're saying, well, they're not criminals, they're not convicted yet. Yeah, however, they've been arrested for criminal charges sitting in the county jail. We're not going to sit and wait for conviction because a lot of prosecutors will say, look, if you're going to deport them, we just drop the case and deport them and save the taxpayer a lot of money. However, if the prosecutor wants to prosecute them, we work with the prosecutor, do a writ, saying we'll put them back in your custody for prosecution if you guarantee after you're done you release them to us. So we're working that way. So we're doing the best we can for local prosecutors and having the first shot at it. But if they don't want that shot, then we're going to remove them. We're not going to release them in the community to reoffend. But we are concentrating on public safety threats. Right? I want to be clear, and you and I have talked about this before. Prioritization of public safety threats, national security threats, doesn't mean everybody else is off the table. Especially in sanctuary cities where we're forced into the neighborhood to find a guy they released from a county jail. When we go looking for that guy, many times we find others who aren't a criminal target but are in the country illegally. We're going to arrest them and enforce the immigration law. That's what the law requires.
No, look, I get it, Tom. I'm not fighting you on that point. I'm saying if it's 3 out of 4 are traffic and low-level offenses, then you start to get close.
It's not 3 out of 4.
To what?
Chris, it's not 3 out of 4.
But all right. I'm looking at these numbers, and I asked it to you open-ended. If it's wrong, it's wrong. This is what I'm looking at. You saw the graphic. That's where I'm getting the numbers from. But whatever. My bigger point is, you start to get close to what I think the president is kind of ceding some ground on. He's gone back and forth, but the latest is people who are working on farms, people who are working in hospitality, you're going to leave them alone because they're so important to those industries and to those communities. Isn't that something that he really should acknowledge, and that not everybody who comes into this country illegally is the same?
No, I think, he's the one that, first brought up some sort of program for farm workers and those in the hospitality industry. That's President Trump came up with that. And I think it makes sense. The details aren't in yet, so it's still under discussion. I don't want to get ahead of the president what the actual plan looks like. But remember, he also came up in the first Trump 45, Chris. He came up with an immigration plan. He wanted a DACA fix, remember? But Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi didn't want it because he asked for border funding. He also came up with an immigration policy that I was a part of, and I thought it made sense. That immigration would be based on merit. Those who can come and improve this nation through various means and all sorts of labor. However, he still left room for families, moms and dads, sons and daughters. So, a plan's being worked, and hopefully we'll get another plan soon. And I think the president's trying to do the right thing, and I support him on this. I mean, I grew up in farm country. I understand the need for dairy workers and so forth. If they can't legal workforce, then it's up to Congress and this administration to come up with options. And so I'm with the president, and we'll see what the policy ends up being. But he came up with this himself, and I'll support it, and we'll see what the final details look like.
Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says she's in talks with 5 Republican governors to build additional migrant detention facilities. But Noem did not name those specific states. She says, however, those governors are interested in duplicating the model of Florida's so-called Alligator Alcatraz, a migrant detention facility located deep in Florida's Everglades. The detention facility has triggered concern from human rights advocates after reports of unsafe living conditions. NewsNation's Mills Hayes joins us live with the latest. Mills, what are you learning about these new potential facilities that could be built?
Hi, Alex. Well, Homeland Secretary Kristi Noem. She says she wants to double the capacity in these ICE detention centers, of course, as the Trump administration ramps up their promise of mass deportations. But the facility in Florida, it's facing tough criticism, Democrats calling the conditions of detained migrants inhumane.
The cruelty is the point. This is a stunt. Dropping flimsy infrastructure in the middle of the Everglades in a swamp where they bragged about it being surrounded by alligators and pythons. The whole point is to, look tough, like they're trying to go after bad hombres.
Just 2 days after lawmakers filed a lawsuit against Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for not being allowed inside Alligator Alcatraz, members of Congress and state representatives were given a tour on Saturday to inspect the conditions at the facility in the Everglades. But after a limited tour this weekend, Democratic lawmakers described cage-style units with 32 men inside, sharing 3 combination toilet sink devices with temperatures at 83 degrees. But Republicans on the same tour described the detention center as clean and well-functioning.
The only thing that we can come to is that they're just lying because they want to portray something that it's not. And the trick for the Democrats is that they know that there's no cameras or no photos allowed inside. So they can go on social media, go on the airwaves and espouse all this stuff. And they know that no one can call BS. But I'm telling you, I was there and I'm calling BS on them.
DHS Secretary Kristi Noem said that any issues that were there at Alligator Alcatraz have now all been addressed, Alex.
So, Mills, did Secretary Noem address those concerns about the conditions at Alligator Alcatraz and potential new facilities?
Well, Noem says that the detention centers at a federal level, like Alligator Alcatraz, they are all held to a higher standard than most local, state, and federal prisons. And she also said this weekend, as you mentioned, she's in talks with 5 other Republican-led states. No mention on which states, but she's been in talks with them to create detention centers inspired by this one. And she pushed back on criticism of Alligator Alcatraz, saying that she would not call where the migrants are being held as jail cells.
We will take cameras in there and show people what these facilities look like, because if you compare them to what happened under the Biden administration and under the Obama administration, these centers are at the highest levels, and they're even higher than what our federal prison standards are.
I also just spoke with the Florida Immigration Coalition. They advocate for human rights, but they say their attorney partners are having trouble seeing and communicating with their clients that are inside Alligator Alcatraz. And they also tell me that family members of people that are detained there have been reaching out to them, complaining of toilets that don't flush, no medical attention, and also lack of water. Alex?
The immigrant detention center in the Florida Everglades, known as Alligator Alcatraz, at the center now of another court battle. Civil rights attorneys have filed a lawsuit arguing that detainees are being deprived due process. They say people are being kept in custody without any formal criminal or immigration charges against them. And they say there is no standard or confidential way for detainees to communicate with their lawyers. The state of Florida disputes that. It says detainees have had access to video conferencing since mid-July, and in-person meetings began more than 3 weeks ago. It also says no requests to meet with an attorney have been rejected. Joining us now, attorney Renata Castro, who is the founder of the USA for All immigration law firm. Thank you so much for joining us. The state of Florida says the detainees are getting adequate access to attorneys. What are their rights, and how would you define adequate?
Adequate seems to be a moving target at this time. Detainees should be afforded the opportunity under their due process rights to conference with their attorneys confidentially. And that is one of the main concerns that the legal community has for the detainees in Alligator Alcatraz at this time, because the rooms, the facility was built at such speed, if you will, that the rooms and the facilities just can't accommodate private conferences with a private counsel for the number of individuals and with the speed that these individuals are being placed in removal. So that is why this lawsuit arose, and that's why attorneys all over the country are fighting for their clients to make sure that they get access to due process and can fight their immigration claims lawfully.
And how about the claims that they're being kept in custody without any formal criminal or immigration charges against them?
This should not come as a surprise that immigrants throughout the United States, even those that have a claim to a lawful status, just recently we have seen the United States government begin to issue NTAs, which are notices to appear, the equivalent of a summons in a criminal case, for individuals who are in the country without status but are actually pursuing lawful status, such as those marrying U.S. citizens or parents of U.S. citizens. This historically has never been the norm, but the government really changing the use of its resources to make sure that the highest number of people are detained in facilities such as Alligator Alcatraz in lightning speed. So when we see the individuals that are going to the detention centers, they are rarely individuals with a criminal record. They're usually those who have committed immigration violations, and they are able to be detained. But historically, the United States government has never pursued those claims just because it was not judicially efficient to do so.
Because you then lead to a backlog and overcrowding? Is that why?
Certainly. We have to see that immigration detention facilities are private facilities and quite lucrative ones. At this time, the United States government does not have enough immigration judges to hear these cases. So what we're seeing is just a merry-go-round of individuals who fall through the cracks when it comes to due process, because not all of them end up in front of a judge, either because they don't have an attorney, or in some cases, as it has been alleged in the lawsuit being heard by Judge Ruiz in Miami, some of them just end up deported because they couldn't speak to their attorney in a fast enough manner. So this is why it is so important that lawsuits like these really shed some light into the real conditions that these individuals are being subjected to, especially at a time when we're seeing American citizens be wrongfully detained. And can you imagine if one of them ends up deported? I think that that day will soon come.
Renata Castro, thank you this morning.